Our speaker for today, Health Fair Sunday, Dr. Oswald Rowan Thomas. That's BPS, MS, PhD. I'm a program and in PhD too. She's a program and also PhD. Dr. Thomas has provided essential intelligence and practical guidance to individuals and organizations for over 30 years. His broad background in education, psychotherapy, community organizing, youth work, and social advocacy strategy create a successful track record. When I heard of Alexis, I said, thank God that we have a man who is big time in it coming to speak to us today. What we need most are people who have that kind of spirit to advocate on our behalf. Amen? Thank you, Doc. He specializes in how the psychology of cognition, attitude, persuasion, and perception evoke decisions built on courage, hope, optimism, and happiness. Dr. Thomas has worked locally, regionally, and internationally with children and adolescents as a psychotherapist, and has consulted with leaders in higher education, media, and business to improve personal and professional functioning. He received PhD from Pacific Western University and his Master of Science in Public Administration and Human Services from Metropolitan College of New York, Bachelor of Professional Studies in Human Services from Metropolitan College of New York. He completed his clinical work at Beacon Therapy Services in Long Island, New York. His recent project involved coordinating transitions of group homes from state to private ownership, training for the Center for the Teacher Effectiveness, and project manager for social services at St. Mary's Center for Children and Family, and psychotherapist and hypnotherapist with Long Island City Psychotherapy Services. He also holds a PhD from North Central University in General Psychology. He currently works for the New Jersey State Department of Health and Behavioral Sciences as a staff clinical psychologist at, forgive me if I don't pronounce it right, Ancora Psychiatric Hospital. Church, it's an honor and pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Thomas Oswald.
Good afternoon, church. Good afternoon, church. Good. It's certainly a pleasure for me to be here, and certainly like to thank Dr. Farrell as we met through a mutual friend. And God certainly does work in mysterious ways. His wonders to be praised. So I relish the opportunity, every opportunity I get to speak to my people about mental illness, because it's very real. And I say my people because many of us are from many different societies and countries where we are told that it is not something that is real. And most of us, when our children misbehave, we think that all they probably need is a good spanking to straighten them and get them right. Not always the case, because our children may be suffering from mental pressure. It is very important. Mental illness in America is a $10 billion industry. Many folks suffer from mental illness in this country and around the world, may I say. And often it is not diagnosed, and often in young people, mental illness in young people normally starts from age 14. some earlier. I think about one of my patients that I have now, and she has been trying to commit suicide since she was 12 years old, and still engaged in certain types of behavior that are not good. 1 in 5 young person ages 13 to 18 have had a seriously debilitating mental illness at some point in their life. 1 in 6 young persons ages 6 to 17 experience mental illness. 50% of all persons in their lifetime will experience some form of mental illness. And for young people, that begins at age 14. And 75% experience a mental illness by the age of 24 years old. Substance use disorder. 1 in 6 adults have a substance use disorder, whether it's including alcohol and the abuse of prescription drugs. Anxiety and depression. 12.5% of adults age 18 and older have a regular feeling of worry, nervousness, anxiety, and 5.0% have regular feelings of depression. Now, depression and anxiety are 2 of the most common mental illness, and they look different depending on culture and race and society. They look different. So it may be one thing for a person in America, it may be different for someone elsewhere. And so 19.8% of adults are experiencing a mental illness right now, equivalent of 50 million Americans are experiencing a mental illness. Some of us may chalk it up as just a bad feeling. Again, mental illness are among the most common health conditions in the United States. More than 1 in every 5 person U.S. adult lives with a mental illness. An estimated 26% of Americans age 18 and older, about 1 in every 4 suffers from a diagnosable mental disorder. Sometimes even our young people that often get into trouble and have contact with the legal system, they're not tested, but more than 50% have a mental illness. Now, I often say to our people, while we take mental illness as a joke, don't seek treatment, and sometimes it is not readily available. But because of the stigma, many families do not want to have a person in their family with a mental illness, because that is not something that's supposed to happen to our families. Suicidal ideations are prevalent among young people, sometimes because of the stress of socioeconomic status of the parents creates many stress for our young people. And sometimes that stress, if persistent, leads to depression, anxiety, and they need some assistance. And some will not seek any form of help. So that's very important for us to understand. Schizophrenia And let me say this, that mental illness is either hereditary by genetics or it is environmental. So if you have persistent homelessness, you're likely to develop a mental illness due to the stress of such persistent homelessness. If you are a drug user, you're likely to develop or be dual diagnosed with substance disorder and a mental illness. And these things can be persistent. Sometimes the pressure that families put on their children, sometimes the pressure that children put on themselves in order to measure up to sister, to brother, to the Joneses next door, can create that type of mental illness. And so we sometimes put pressure on our children to get good grades, and there is nothing wrong with getting good grades. And when they fall short, we chastise them. We chastise them. We chastise them as opposed to praising them for doing good that far and allow them to work their way up. And that can create mental illness for many of our young people. I often say to folks, I have a 9-year-old grandson. And his father died when he was 2.5 years old. And I had to raise my grandson, because my son wasn't here. And I understand the pressure on him as he grew up, knowing that he don't have a father and have to function. So one of the things that I work to do is to build his self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-worth, because that was important. And from kindergarten, I've never asked my grandson for a grade, how he did, how well. I say to him from kindergarten up to this day, when you go to school today, ask the teacher an intelligent question. And there is no bad questions. And when he gets home, we will discuss what question he asked the teacher today, and we'll discuss that. And that he continued to do. Last April, the teacher called his mom to say, we would like to test him because of the types of questions that he asked the teacher. And so he was tested. They retested him again in September last year. And they declare him as a gifted child. His IQ, the average IQ, is 85 to 115. His is 130. And so, by law, they now have to put him in a gifted program where he has gifted classes. And of course, he tells me he wants to be an astronaut, and that's what he wants to do. I remember taking his first flight. He was 3 years old. And when we went up in the air, we were heading to Arizona. And he said to me, look across and said, Grandpa, do you know something? We are really, really high up in the sky. And then he brought tears to my eyes because he said, but my daddy is still higher up in heaven. 3 years old. 3 years old. And so how we interact with our children, what we tell them, what we teach them, what we expect of them, because children will live what is expected of them. And so we ought to be very careful. So we all have mental issues. We all do. We all do. But it depends on how well we are able to bounce back. If you have a debt in the family, especially someone who is close to you and loving, you're going to be depressed. You're going to feel sorrowful. You're going to feel that way. But if that feeling persists extendedly, you need help. You need help. You need it because you're not able to bounce back, which we call mental toughness. And if you're not able to bounce back, and some people go into such deep depression that they need medication, strong medication, to remove them back to reality. And I work with many folks who have no reality, none whatsoever, and we work to bring them back. You know, I have a young lady who I got discharged this year from the hospital after 31 years. 31 years. And she killed her mom. Had schizophrenia. And one of the sad thing about schizophrenia, one of the negative symptoms of schizophrenia is the ability to love. And a person with schizophrenia cannot love. So this is why it's necessary to treat them. But mom knew something was wrong, and mom took her daughter to see the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist wanted her medicated, and the psychiatrist recognized the condition of the young lady and asked mom to put her in the hospital until the medication kicks in. Mom says no. She wants her daughter home. Again, the stigma. And by 5 o'clock that afternoon, mom received 15 stab wounds. And that young lady truly believed that someone was coming to hurt mom, and so she was doing the best for her. I have one lady I got discharged. She drove into the Delaware River with her 3 children strapped in because she was saving them from the devil. And she truly believed that that is what she was doing. Because, again, the treatment. And so sometimes, and I often says that the first person to notice that something is off is the home. Mom, dad, caregiver, brother, sister can recognize that so-and-so don't look right, don't sound right, not behaving right, needs some help. And so sometimes we make excuses, and sometimes we live this busy life. Sometimes the socio-economic condition push us to have 1 and 2, maybe 3 jobs, and we don't have time to see what's going on, because when we get home, we're so tired, we just want to go to bed, and we don't interact with our household. And that can be a problem. So mental illness is real. It's a real problem that you can have. However, there is help. Sometimes you need someone to talk to. You need someone other who will not judge you for what you're about to tell them, because you have feeling and we have these feelings. A lot of young folks, a lot of older folks, sometimes you chuck up that, oh man, this is the end of the world. This don't look good. Man, I got a couple B's or a couple C's or a couple D's. I failed some classes. How am I going to explain this? And so a young person may perceive that as the end of the world and therefore commit suicide, or at least attempt to do that. You know, I have a patient I'm discharging this week. If you look, he has a scar on his neck. He tried to kill himself by cutting his own throat. And the last thing that bring him to the hospital, he jumped off a bridge trying to commit suicide. And I'm trying to find out why. And he says to me, because my sister died, and she was a better person than me, and I think I am the one who should have died. And so certainly trying to kill himself. And so we come back to what we call faulty thinking. Beck calls it faulty thinking when we perceive nothing. That's it. We go to the extreme that nothing is right anymore. Nothing, it's all wrong. And so I say to folks, sometimes folks, you know, one lady said to me, she was suffering from depression for many, many years. And when I started working with her, she said to me that she didn't know she could feel this good again. We didn't know she could feel this good again. And again, children of divorced parents. Sometimes people say we'll stay together because for the sake of the kids. But if you are bickering and fighting and at each other's throat, this is not good for the kid. Because the kid perceives that they are the problem, and if they didn't come, mommy and daddy wouldn't be fighting. And sometimes I see a lot of young people work overtime to bring peace in the house, to put mommy and daddy together again, so that there is no fighting. A little 5-year-old, mom and dad constantly fights. And the 5-year-old went into the corner, get a towel, put the towel over her head, and make some funny sounds. And mom and dad forgot what they were fighting about and start laughing at the child. The child perceives that if I could just make mommy and daddy happy, there will be peace in the house. So every time there's an argument, a 5-year-old tries to do something to make mommy and daddy laugh. Laughter is good. Laughter is wonderful. Spiritual stuff is good. And we urge people to laugh often, to spend time together, spend quality time together. We ask persons to call somebody. I know it's easy to WhatsApp, you know, how are you doing? And the person is obviously going to respond that they're doing super fine. And it is not true. Because when you pick up the phone every now and then and you call, you can hear the breaking voice that all is not well. Social media. Need to teach our folks how to use social media properly, because that too is creating mental illness among our young people. Our young people are so focused on social media, they don't take their eyes out of the phone. Some don't have time to study, and some meet unsavory characters online, and they feel that they're in love. Right now, many of you may not know, but anybody who wants an online girlfriend or an online boyfriend, there are websites now for that, where you could actually engage with your online wife or online boyfriend who you can talk to, use yours, you're communicating daily. And that too can be a problem. A young man from Indonesia committed suicide. He's married, but he also has an online girlfriend that he talks to. And he was telling his online girlfriend about some problems he's having with his wife and how bad things are. And hear the advice the online girlfriend gave to him. The online girlfriend said, well, why don't you just end it and come and be with me? And he truly believed that that person on the computer, on his phone, is real and is somewhere and he took his own life. He took his life so he could be with his girlfriend. So the exposure to a lot of stuff is happening, and we have to, this is why it's important. I know some people will say, hey, we don't want to invade our children, our young people. We want to give them their privacy and so forth. But privacy can only be thus far, because you need to know what your kids are doing, what they're doing online, who they're talking to, and so forth, because many of our young people, on the age and otherwise, they are meeting, because behind the screen, persons are telling you that we're the same age. but you're actually meeting somebody who twice your grandfather. And these things happen. So it is very important that we understand these things. And a lot of stuff that is happening in our world, the pressures that is happening, our socioeconomic condition, having not enough money or resources to meet our family need can create problem. I say to folks, look, I used to have folks that come to me just to talk, just to relax, because everyday living can have its own issues. Just to live every day has its own issues. And sometimes we face those good bosses and bad bosses, and that person who sits in the corner who don't like us, and we may not like them either, and those who try to, get our the promotion in front of us, and they bad play us, and we are stressed that, we can't believe that so-and-so done this to me after all that I have done for them and so forth. Those things can be stressful. And one of the problems that we have because of the stigma, we do not seek help because we don't want to talk to a psychologist, we don't want to see a psychiatrist, and worse yet, we don't want any kind of psychotropic medication whatsoever. We can deal with that. People are happy to go see a medical doctor. People are proud to tell you, I went to the doctor, they say I may have to do a biopsy for cancer. People are happy to say, they may say, I have a heart problem, or I have diabetes, or I have high blood pressure. And people are happy to say those things. Many people are not happy to say, I have a mental illness. I'm suffering from anxiety and stress caused by whatever the case might be. Many people are not happy to say that. And many people are happy to go to the drugstore to pick up medication for all the other illness, for your metformin and your Ozempic and everything, but not for psychotropic medication to keep you where you are. Look, schizophrenia and its spectrum are imbalance in the brain. So I always say to my patient, you didn't choose mental illness. You didn't go to the supermarket. Let me find all who would go to the supermarket to buy mental illness. Anybody would pick up a basket, go through the thing and buy mental illness? Absolutely not. We wouldn't do it. We wouldn't do it. So it cannot be your fault. So please, do not think that it is your fault and you need to seek help. And if you seek help, you can get help and you can live a normal and productive life. I like to say to folks, a lot of the rappers, a lot of the actresses, a lot of the singers suffer from mental illness. Kanye West, Lady Gaga, you name them, Cher, they all suffer from mental illness, but you can function. You can function with a mental illness and live your best life. So please, it is not something for us to be ashamed of. It is not something for us to be afraid of. If we have it, we have it. And I say to you, if you have a member of your family with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, you are very likely to get it. Very likely to get it. Because it is genetics, is hereditary, and you're likely to get it. If you have environmental issues with housing, health care, finances, family problems that seems to linger on. I mean, because sometimes, families, sometimes I say to folks all the time, if anything bad is going to happen to us, it is likely to happen within our families and by a family member. And by a family member. So please, if you can, see, you know, and you should know something is off. And this is one of the things we do. We try to teach all of our patients about their symptoms. What are the symptoms are you experiencing? Because if you know the symptoms that you're experiencing, then you know you need help. And I've had patients who experience certain, and they go check themselves in at the emergency room. They walk right in and said, look, I'm having this has been a few days now. I've been having these racing thoughts, just racing thoughts. I can't get rid of them. I can't tame them. And I've tried everything. I think I need some help. And with the modern medication that we have, the new generation of SSRIs, they work fantastic. Everything comes with this. And, you know, sometimes you may have to be on a medication that is not really helping your mental illness, but it's to combat the side effects. You know, and sometimes that happens. And if you have a medical condition, you're likely to develop mental illness if you're not careful. So if you're diagnosed with cancer or heart disease, any kind of terminal illness can be very stressful because now you're thinking of life and death issues. And if you begin to think of life and death issues, you can become anxious. You can become depressed. And that's important. Nowadays, we say a person who is being discharged from a hospital, be it psychiatric or mental or medical, you are you're at higher risk for committing suicide. Higher risk for committing suicide. So we have to know what it is and what ails us and what the problems will be. You know, I have the pleasure of working the Providence Baptist Church in Liberia, and the Association of Baptist Church in Liberia, as the government is looking to do a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the 14-year war. And they have reached out to me and asked me to help them to devise a proposal to set up trauma counseling center around Liberia. And when I worked in Liberia, I met a lot of folks who were traumatized, a lot of folks who said that they wake up in the night cold sweat, fear that they swear they hear gun blazing. I met one gentleman who told me he dressed in like a woman with wig and had on a dress and high heels and walked all night to get to Ivory Coast. Those things can cause mental illness. The stress of what you have to do, life changes, can create that kind of mental illness. So if you're not mentally tough, if you find that you are having these reoccurring thoughts, if you find that things are not the same what they used to be, I say to you, talk to somebody. You may need some help. I know God works in mysterious ways, but we have to recognize that even Christ, before returning to his Father, says that great things have I done, but greater things will he do. And he was talking about you and I, the gifts that he will give to us to help one another. So whether you are a pastor, medical doctor, psychologist, or whatever you will become, it is the gifts that God has given to us so that we can help one another. And we shouldn't be afraid to use them to help one another and come to one another to get what we need, because sometimes, just reading the Bible alone may not be enough. Sometimes prayer, and sometimes we pray, and God answers our prayer, but we don't like the answer that he gives us. We don't like the answer, because he may be sending you to someone to talk to about your issue. All right? So we have to be careful. Not look for the answers that we want, but the answer that the Almighty sent. All right? So at this point, I will stop. and I'm open to questions, any questions that folks may have. Yes, sir. Pastor.
Question to you, sir. Okay, we know that this is a stigma within the black community. You know, I'm from Jamaica. You know, when it comes down to going to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, we're enough for that. Now, what can we do to eliminate that stigma and to bring that type of assurance that it's okay to talk about it and to seek help outside of the Bible? For I believe also that, like what you said, God gives gift. So what can we do as a people to deal with that?
And especially black and brown communities. Black and brown communities, we do not reach out. And for me, I believe that it is part of the residual effect of slavery that has caused this upon our people. And so we can begin to have conversations about it. We can force governments to make policies towards the care of persons who are suffering from mental illness. We also should be able to gather the family together and say to the family that John was just diagnosed today with a mental illness and he will need all our support. Because I find mental patients who have strong family support are more likely to recover than those who don't. And so that's very important. And therefore somebody goes, look, to be honest with you, I have patients in the hospital that nobody ever called. Nobody ever called. Nobody wants to. Nobody ever come to see them. Nobody come to see them because they're too ashamed that their loved one is locked away in a mental institution and for them to tell them that there is in a mental institution. You know, I've done some work in Jamaica, done some work with the Adventist Church. I've done some work with some private clients I've had, and I say private. I remember flying to Jamaica. I fly to Jamaica because I had one client who was very suicidal. Young girl was suicidal. She was going to the University of the West Indies. She bought some cookies with her and the other friends at lunch, and the cookies were laced with marijuana. Laced with marijuana. And that set her off. She just went off from there. You know, spoke to the mother, I talked to her, was doing WhatsApp, and I had to go on the ground to talk with her. And then I found out her sister, too, was having some issues and so forth. And because there's a lot of issues that came out that even, so while the marijuana was a conduit towards that, there were some things that are going on before that was fueling that kind of mental depression that the folk was in. And to even get her back to university, you know what I had mom do? Because she had to miss a couple of semesters. And when it was time to go back, to ease the anxiety and the fear, I had to have mom drove her to the university gate, take her back home. Next morning, drove her past the university gate, get out of the car. Next day, actually walk into the building. So what is called desensitization. And so we had to desensitize her so we could get her back into university. She still called me. She's happy. She's thankful, mom, and everyone is happy for what has happened. But the reality is, even her psychiatrist in Jamaica, I had to educate as to psychotropic medication and so on that is suitable, because she was also fearful because she almost died from an overdose of the medication that the doctor prescribed. So that's another issue that you could have. And so some people are afraid of psychotropic medication because psychotropic medication, some have their side effects. I mean, some they can kill your intimacy and other stuff that can happen. So that's something that is but we really have to begin to talk about it as a people, not be afraid. Look, anytime you hear of a white kid commit a murder or a shooting, what's the next thing you hear? The parents are on the radio saying, oh, well, he suffers from a mental illness. He's seen his psychiatrist regular. He's on medication. I don't know what happened. He probably got off the medication and so forth. He's not right in his head. He's not well. And so they get away. So the Colorado shooter who shoot up all those people in the movie theater, they didn't call him a thug. They didn't call him any of that. They said he had a mental illness. And so he was treated as such. So he gets to serve his time in a mental institution. You know, I have a young guy from Las Vegas. He killed his mom. But he was deemed not guilty by reason of insanity. So he gets to serve his time with me. And now he's 27. It happened at 25. He's looking to get out. So, and those are things that also we have to do, because sometimes the court asks us to determine whether or not this person is responsible for what the action they took at the time they took the action. And so sometimes they just lost sense with reality. No sense with reality. And he killed his mom because he believed that his mom was having sex with him and that his mom was poisoning his medication and that his mom was doing all these things to him. And so the voices in his head was telling to eliminate the threat. Eliminate the threat. We have, in New Jersey, they have what they call Crowell. And the person put on Crowell. And Crowell was a real man who actually believed that his wife and his boss were conspiring to kill him. And so he struck first and killed his wife. All right? And of course, he challenged the court system that they couldn't keep him locked up in a mental institution for the rest of his life. So this is something that is very, very important, that we have these kinds of conversation. God is good. He's wonderful. He's all-seeing eye God. But at the same time, we have issues that we come across that we can deal with one another. When he tells you to go talk to your pastor for counseling, he is not joking. When your pastor can't handle, your pastor refer you out to somebody else who is more experienced than him, because the pastor recognizes that you need more help than he can offer. And that is what happens. When you're in doubt, you refer out. Simple as that. And that is the thing that has to happen. So we have to talk about this. And a lot of what the problems that we face comes from that intergenerational trauma that we face from slavery up to this day. 100 years of Jim Crow law, being chattel slave, being whipped, and so what happened is that our people from slavery days had to develop mental toughness. And the kind of toughness that they develop in those days, it lacks emotion. And so when your mom and your dad, we don't hug our kids and say, I love you and dope on them. No, because back in slavery days, they couldn't or they wouldn't do that sort of stuff. Because what happened? Your children were sold, taken away from you, and sold. Don't know where your kids are. Some of us probably married our brothers and sisters, we don't know. Some kind of generation come down the line because of what happened. So that created that trauma that we still face. And so we know grandma loves us. We know mama loves us. But she just never say it. She just never says it. She does whatever she does. And that can pass down to us. Just like mom never call you in the kitchen and show you how to make the oxtail or how to make fried dumplings. It is something that is given. You simply watch and you learn, and then you start making your own. And that is the same thing that has passed down to us all of these years. Not only that, we were taught to hate our skin. The very color of our skin we hate. And so we praise anybody else who don't look like us, but we put ourselves down. So we they have done a terrible job on us. And so we have to begin to have these conversations because we are descendants of great people. All right? So that's my thing for that. Let's keep that conversation alive. All right? Any other questions? Yeah, over here, sir.
Yeah, question. How effective are physical drugs on the mental capacity of a person? Because if it's a mental disorder, it's not physical, it's mental. How do the medications, the drugs, affect the person to get rid of that mental problem? How effective is that?
Very effective, but as you know, all medication, that's why the doctor will find out your body type, your age, all of the various statistics about you before administering medication. That medication may start at 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, depending, to make sure that you can accept it. But I said to you, there are medication. For a person hearing voices, there are medication that works fantastic in dumbing those voices. Those voices will disappear. And there are some folks have a lot of personality disorder. I've had patients with, and sometimes I have to ask, which one are you showing up today? Could you tell me who is here in this room with me today? Because they sometimes have 4, 5, 6 personalities. All different, all have different names, all have different mannerism. So which is the real one? And medication, psychotropic does help with some of that. Sometimes it comes with its own side effect, which is why some people don't like to take it. And this is why it's important that you continue to see your doctor so you can tell the doctor. No, we said don't stop your medication unless you talk to your doctor and the doctor tells you break your tablet in half and only take a dose, or don't take this until you come. But they have been very effective in treating mental illness. A lot of patients that I know who have been severe after taking, look, I have one girl, one lady, and she married somebody from the Middle East, and they messed her up. He messed her up, got his green card, he came to America. When he got here, apparently he had a wife that he had here before, and so he messed her up, drove her into mental illness, drove her to the point where her kids got taken away from her, and he got the kids and so forth. And that was a source for her because she loved those kids. And for 2 years, she stayed with us for 2 years, refused all medication. And I begged her and I begged, and she said, no, no, no. And then the court asked me to do a report. And in my report, I said to the court that she wasn't competent to proceed to trial because, she was on a high-speed chase to New Jersey, running through red lights and the police sign behind her and so forth. Poor lady. And I said to the court that she needs medication. She needs anything between 5 and 25 milligrams, at least Zyprexa or Zoloft, something of that sort. And the court asked her if she was willing to take it, and she said yes. And from the time she started on 5 milligrams, she became a whole different person. It was amazing to see her, like, oh, wow. And I convinced her to take 15. And she took 15. And we were able to discharge her. She's out. She has a job. She has visitation with her kids and likely working to get her kids back. Because not because you have a mental illness mean that you can't be a good parent. Okay? That's not true. You can be a very good parent, but you just have medication. Sometimes some mental illness that you have, you're going to be on medication for the rest of your life. Just like diabetes. Just like diabetes. So very, very important. All right? Any other question? Yes.
Hi. I understand that mental illness comes in various forms, and sometimes not always do we need medication. So for like life stresses that can make you feel stressed and like you need some type of help, what recommendation do you have for that? And also, I'm sorry, I have two questions. And also for especially the youth, sometimes they feel overwhelmed with life and the changes that are happening, and they tend to be anxious or depressed, you know, whichever way it goes. What's your recommendation for them too?
So you need talk therapy, and talk therapy works. Having somebody non-judgmental to talk to. I normally say to my patient when they come to see me, I said, now you're here to see me, you're going to leave, whatever is bothering you, you're going to leave it here with me, I'll keep it, and you're going to walk out the door with no longer carrying that weight. No longer. And we sit down and we talk about it, what are the stresses, and and I will tell you about coping skills, things that you can do to cope with what is going on, how to handle it. And after a few sessions, people are fine and dandy and don't need any medication. Because I have a lot of patients who don't need medication. They just need somebody to talk to. They just need to practice their coping skills and do right, eat on time, and sleep. Sleep. You should get at least 8 to 9 hours of sleep. Because when you are sleep deprived, you could be as person suffering from a mental illness. Sleep deprivation can mimic mental illness. Sleep deprivation is very important, that the body gets enough rest and eat healthy. Those are very important things, very important activities. Folks who go to church, church is a good activity to help you with your mental illness. Community activities. Young people, sit down, somebody to talk to, things for them to do. And a lot of my young people, when I see them, I give them a time management chart. And I ask them to chart their activity from the time they wake up to the time they go back to bed. What that is going to be, and ask them to follow it. Very, very important for them. Schoolwork, when you're going to do your homework, when you're going to do your time on social media, your time to watch TV, all of that is all timed out. And you're done by a certain time. That's very, very important. You know, when I had young kids, I didn't take any phone call. Nobody could call my house before after 10 o'clock. Because that time is when I spend with my kids, helping them make sure their homework is done, dinner, dishes, the whole 9 yard is done after 10. That's it. Then you can call me. I'll talk to you then. But that was my time with my children, with my household. So I know what is going on. And that's very important. So if you lose that connection with the kids, then you have a problem, because trust me, the kids will be connecting with somebody, just not you. They'll be connecting and talking to somebody on social media or somebody at school, and who gives them wrong information, terrible information. And another thing we forget to talk to them about, you know, because sometimes our kids are on, you see the age of young teens, teenage years are the most challenging years of a child, of anyone's life. It is the time when you begin to find your peers, where you fit in. It is the time you gravel with your sexuality, what because you can find yourself being attracted to persons that you don't think you should be attracted to, and so forth, during your teenage years. And so those are important. And it is important to have a mom or a dad or someone in knowledge who you can come home and talk and not be ashamed to say, Mom, I saw this boy today and he tells me he loves me. What do you think about that? And Mom and you can have that conversation. And I say to parents all the time, it's a good time to open the door. One parent said to me that her daughter said, Mom, where does babies come from? And Mom answer to the daughter was, when you're old enough, you will know. Daughter says, but I know. She said, well, how you know? She said, well, I was watching TV last night and... They didn't block out the screen, everything. And I often says, when a person asks a question, then it's the time to open that door. When my friends or anybody call me and says, look, doc boy, I'm suffering, I can't go on, I feel like it's the end, I hear end of life kind of decision making. And I say, hold on, I'm coming. Let's talk about this before you do anything. And I often says, never give in, never give up. Never give in, never give up. And I run to talk to folks because I hear a cry for help. And persons always cry out for help first. We just do not acknowledge that. All right? Any other questions? Somebody have 3. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I have 3 questions. One is close to her. When a teenager or a young person goes into the emergency room and say there are a little bit like, they're having issues, they ask them a whole list of questions. Some of the questions are just straight yes and no. There's no in between. So that teenager might just be saying, or young adult, they might be saying, well, I'm not feeling exactly that way. But because they put yes, the situation look worse for them on paper. Do you understand where I'm going with it? Yes. So that I want to hear your opinion on that, and as well as if a young person check themselves into the mental hospital and the parents want to come in and say, listen, we don't want the child to be on medication as yet, or I want your opinion as well, like, does a parent have a say when that person check themselves in as a youngster because they're still not fully themselves? And also, can people go and pray for that individual as a group? Is it a good time or not a good time? And the last question is, this new medication that you mentioned, a lot of people who I hear take medication before, they ate it because of the amount of side effects. These new ones that are coming out, is it better for people who are just stressed for life, but they feel that they're going there, or people on the border of anxiety and depression?
Yeah. So you have a person suffering from mental illness who's already determined there's nothing wrong with them and they don't need medication. They will focus on the side effects of the medication and not the work that the medication can do to help them. And so some folks would not even experience the side effects at all, but they focus because it's disclosed on the paper. They will list those first. Oh, it says I'm going to have headaches, I'm going to have sweating and so forth, and they wouldn't take it. And eventually the medication actually works for them. But there are folks who have bad experience with some medication. And so once they tell the physician that, or the psychiatrist, we will list those as medication that cannot be given. So because some people have certain issues with them. And some men do not like certain medication because they don't get any kind of erection, and they don't want that. kind of medication. So you have to find something to combat that or something else that may work for them. But if you are underage, your parents obviously speak for you, and they can say that they don't want you to be on medication. The doctor will try to convince you. However, there is a process called involuntary. So in the hospital, and I sit on the committees from time to time, we have what we call involuntary medication management. And so whether you want it or not, we will meet, we will discuss it, we'll invite you to come. You can say your piece. The psychologist speak, the nurse speak, the outside psychiatrist speak who doesn't work for the hospital, and then we determine that you need medication. And that way, once they approve it, we can force medication on you. Okay? And for your own good, we'll discuss it. If you have a guardian, then that's different. The guardian must approve whatever medication is given or not given. And so what happened, we have folks who have prolonged mental illness for simply not taking any kind of medication. So that happens. A young person checked themselves in the hospital. It's obvious that the young person recognized that they're having some issues that they cannot control. And when you can't control racing thoughts, when you're having hallucinations, and you're hallucinating about other stuff, and when you're having auditory and visual hallucination, when you begin to see things that other people can't see, you need help. You need help. And yes, and there is paranormal. Some people see things that others can't see, but when you're seeing things that nobody else can see, period, and you have a mental illness, that is probably the side effects of what you're diagnosed with. So we have schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia. We have bipolar 1, bipolar 2 disorder. You have depression, anxiety, personality disorder. You have a lot of issues there. And then you have this patient who are diagnosed with antisocial behavior or anti-personality behavior. They fall under cluster A or cluster B with personality. They're narcissists. And they feel they are, can do everything that they want to do. So those are things that are very, very important to find out. And so sometimes parents refuse the child to be on medication because they don't want to deal with the stigma. When they go home and so-and-so asks them, what happened to your child at the hospital? And they have to tell them, well, the person has a little mental breakdown. They don't want to have to tell them that. They would prefer to say their blood pressure was high.
So I just wanted to continue on that part, though. If that individual is hospitalized, is it a good time to go pray? Like you want to gather as a group and go pray? Is it acceptable in that area of the hospital?
All hospitals, including our hospital, we have chaplains. We have chaplains that are ministers that come in and pray with the patient. Some of my patients, I refer them to the chaplain for the chaplain to see them. I have one lady, she tells me every day, she tells me, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. She don't want to eat because she's dying. And then I try to find out, why you think you are dying? She says, well, I'm going to hell. I said, why you think you're going to hell? She says, because I've done a lot of bad things. I said, what are some of the bad things that Christ can't forgive you that you have done? And she said, oh, I've broken up a lot of homes, she used to keep a married man and blah, blah, blah. And so he was the devil himself and so forth. So I recommended her to the chaplain. The chaplain saw her last Wednesday. The chaplain said, Doc, I spoke with her. Now she's asking to go home. She's not asking to die anymore. And she's eating her food and so forth. So you have to recognize there are different disciplines. So we do that thing. Well, however, what we don't do is say a prayer group is coming in. You can come and visit and you can pray with the person, but they won't, outside of the chaplain, and we have Catholic chaplain, Anglican chaplain, Jewish chaplain, all the various denominations that you can find. They will find somebody to pray with you. So that happens.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll allow one more last question. But if it's okay with you, before we close. One more last question. If not, maybe, or should I be the last question? Okay. My question will be, we are Christians and we pray, and sometimes we believe in visions and seeing stuff. So how do you differentiate between what is considered to be spiritual and you have either, how do you call it? Discerning? Discernment, right? To discern something. What is, or you are just maybe, what is the difference? And then the second one, or somebody asked a question pertaining to children, and I was going to add, like, how do you know? I think referring to medication stuff, right? I was going to ask, but you answered it though. But still a little elaboration. How do you know that this process doesn't need medication, but this may need medication? How do you differentiate the two?
So it depends on the severity of the problem. If it's persistent, we know that you need, and if you have gone to see a psychologist, a counselor, and the problem still exists, then we know, excuse me, that you may need some help with what you're facing. You know, thank you. We know you may need some help with what you're facing, so that's very important. You know, I say to folks, as a spiritual man myself, I'm privy and I get to sit on a seat and where I can discern certain things that is happening to my patient. As a member of the laity, a deacon in the church, and my own experience, I'm able to discern sometimes when a person may be seen for real certain things. And we have what we call paranormal psychologists who we can refer them to for those persons. And I had a patient once who I got her because the other psychologists couldn't deal with what she was saying. And she was having paranormal visits at night. And they thought that the scars between her legs were of her doing, but it wasn't. She actually could describe a spirit to me. And so I certainly refer out to a paranormal psychologist who could help her. And I asked them to move her from where she was living in somebody's attic. And once she was removed from the attic and moved to a different apartment, all of that stopped. So I knew that although she had a mental illness, what she was saying was also real. It wasn't fiction of her imagination. But we have the DSM, and the DSM tells us for every disorder, it lists the symptoms that a person will have to experience. And it will list at least 3 that are must. And it will also tell you how long the person must be experiencing these symptoms in order to classify them as depression, anxiety, schizoaffective disorder, or so forth. So we have a guide. So it's not something we just throw out of our book, because what happened is that sometimes 5 persons may be diagnosed with the same problem but cannot be treated the same. And it's treated differently. So that's how we look at that and we work with. And remember, the more you talk, sometimes the psychiatrists, the psychologists get together and we discuss the case and we decide what is the best mode to treat that person. Some people, because of their small frame, they cannot use certain types of medication because it will have a negative effect on them. And so we have to change that. And so this is why most psychiatrists will start you at a low dose and then increase it gradually. And some people, their problem is so severe that they need 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams of medication in order to keep whatever they're keeping at bay. Some people just need 5 milligrams, and that's fine. But some folks are that severe. They're in such deep depression or having these voices that won't abate, voices telling them to hurt themselves or to kill somebody or to do other things to other folks. That is just terrible. I had a patient who almost killed another patient. The voices were telling her to do it, and she saw her as the enemy. She almost plucked her eyes out, you know. So these are things that happen. All right? Hope I answer your question.
Shall we put our hands together for Dr. Thomas? Doc, thank you so very much. I really appreciate you responding to Dr. Sandra and coming to share this information with us. I know majority of the people have gone, but we'll schedule for another special time and where we'll give everything to you early. Amen. And also thank you. Thank you for giving us your time and for paying attention and to listening. I always say the very thing that is plaguing all of us, but we are afraid to talk about, is these issues. And these issues, sadly enough, some ministers are also taking advantage of that and destroying families, and because they want money. And they take stuff from people. They say kind things that they shouldn't say. They interpret things that they should not. These issues are real. They are painful. Emotional stuff are very painful, and they are very real. And we are grateful to people like Dr. Thomas, who are there for people. And sometimes our bishop too deal with these things. Reverend Dr. Ako also deal with these things. And sometimes if you're overwhelmed, also call him. And we thank Dr. Sandra. Let's put our hands together for Dr. Sandra. That's why I can't stop. We should have a day for. I've said it and I will always repeat it. Saves lives. And we have a big example, big, the man who came to visit us here, and casually, not knowing the man was a walking dead man. And at the same time, through Dr. Sandra, the man's life was spared. And even when our own Dr. Tony came to speak to Dr. Sandra, thank you, Mom. I want us to do some quick prayer before we leave, because